So what we were saying is that women are too busy to really sit down and think about why they are taking on all of the domestic responsibilities. I think women just feel so overwhelmed, and I do think it is in a woman's nature to be able to take on a lot of different tasks, because I'm not a mother. In fact, it really annoys me that women in society are only considered in terms of busy mums, and that's it. Women like me, we're invisible. Our lives are so easy because we only have ourselves to look after. Well, that's not true. In fact, it's bloody difficult trying to survive as a single person on a single person's income.
Well, not only that, you use sort of the therapy and the emotional baggage.
We are. We're invisible
you're
still.
Baggage handlers for people's emotional insecurities, because ultimately divorce, it all comes from two people being able to sort things out.
Well, I think that the marriage contract is ridiculously outdated and completely unnatural to both sexes anyway.
Let's just say, can I just say you're a divorce lawyer, so you deal...
Yeah, I do deal with divorces. Yeah. I've been practising family law now for 18 years.
Yeah.
And, obviously I'm only ever seeing it when it goes wrong. But...
Well, yeah, we've got to take that into account. There are many people who are emotionally able to
keep a marriage together. I've never met them, but apparently they do exist.
But the problem is because it is an economic enterprise. So
it is. It's an economic contract.
You can't have marriage and then you suddenly meet someone and you want to move in with that person. That person has got to accept that you're married and that they're taking on the baggage of someone else. They're effectively marrying with two people because it is an economic... You're not one person anymore. You're a dyad.
Yeah.
It's a dyad.
But what is one person anyway? I mean, the thing is that, I don't have children, I don't have a husband, but, I have to care for my mother who is disabled, quite physically disabled.
And you do loads.
And, and it's also running a business where you have staff, you've got to be, and these days staff are like bloody children, they carry on like you're their mother rather than their employer.
Well, this goes back to the narcissism, the individualism. Do you think when people aren't working as hard?
Definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think there are some younger people these days who are quite motivated and they are...
Yeah, and they're on the ADHD spectrum.
Well, yeah.
That's what they are.
Can't calm them the fuck down,
The only workers out there are the ADHDers.
Yeah, casual ableism,
ADHD people are known...
I don't think every single young person who's motivated has ADHD, by the way. Just wanted to put that in there. They're not the only people who are motivated.
Brilliant. So I'm basically loaded with ADHD.
No, I said not every... Well, you're not young and you're not motivated, so what are you talking about?
Anne, you can never strap me down for more than 2 seconds. I was always out climbing something.
That's true.
Going on the road on a 50cc motorbike.
No, your problem is narcissism. We've already established this.
And what's yours then?
Oh, I don't know. Just depression.
Oh, God.
I'm one thalassophobic...
My narcissism was learned behaviour.
Lump of depression, me.
So... We've established that I'm a narcissist.
Yes.
Lovely.
Yeah, stop trying to bring the conversation back to you.
Oh, you bugger! You bugger! You've highlighted it. No, let's go back. I'll edit this out anyway.
No, we're not. I'm going to keep this in.
No, we're not.
I think that our listeners deserve to know they're listening to.
And what about you then? What does that mean you are?
So you're a typical narcissist. You're deflecting it back onto me. We made it about you until it's become uncomfortable.
Shall I tell you something?
Am I pausing this?
I asked you earlier, give me the arguments, give me the evidence, and I will gladly listen, because also narcissists are not good at saying sorry. So you tell me.
No, they can say fake sorry.
Oh, fake sorry.
Yeah, you do fake sorry really well.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Don't worry, narcissists can be very interesting people. It's not a bad thing necessarily.
I'm going quiet because I'm reflecting.
You're not. You're trying to think of something to throw at me.
I am actually. Yeah, I bloody well am. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to throw a spanner in the works here and debate and get myself out.
Anyway, we're going off topic slightly.
We are actually.
But yeah, no. Going back to it, I think the reason why women do end up carrying all the domestic responsibilities, or even all the responsibilities at work, is because I think they just don't have time to sit down and think, well, what's my alternative? They're kind of stuck in these situations where they've kind of been moved like a chess piece into this situation where they have ended up with all of the responsibility. And the fact is, if a woman stopped, it just wouldn't get done. It's this old thing of, if I don't do it, it just doesn't get done. And the family dynamic is wrong. You know, we say, oh, you know, that like the man is the leader.
Family, that's totally unnatural to me. If anything, I would love to see a dynamics. I would love to see a lot more women maybe teaming up with gay men and having children and having a communal style child rearing. But it's not all about the nuclear family. In fact, I think that's where it can be damaging. Two people living under one roof all the time, raising two very...
Well, it's very much a Western concept to have this man and woman. And don't forget, you know, the marriage contract was initially, women were chattels, they were possessions. Women didn't have human status until 1882.
Oh, Edward I, it's well known that he was colluding with Philip IV, saying, has she got good hips, you know, and they were just judging women.
But we couldn't own property until 1882, let alone vote or anything else. And so the marriage contract was actually for a man to buy a woman from her father. That's what it was. You know, you think about the definition of husbandry, it's to plant seeds in. It's women's role was only to be an incubator.
But the original farmers of the land, the gatherers, were female. You know,
they were.
With the matrilineal society, it would have been women and girls.
They did actually used to be like in the villages. This is in medieval times, and I can't remember what they used to call them. In fact, if anyone's listening and they know, let me know. It's where they had a woman. She wasn't like the town crier or anything, but she would get everybody up and she kind of organised the village. We need to have those back. They're like the matron of the village.
But this is what I'm saying. We live in a very masculine, patriarchal society that takes.
But it starts in the family. The family is patriarchal, and that is why it doesn't work. And I don't even think men particularly want it to be patriarchal, to be honest. You know, a lot of the unhappiness I find in husbands is they're never doing enough. Nothing they ever do is good enough. They feel ignored. They feel neglected. They feel that they're just there to provide, and that's never appreciated. But this is a role that was created that way by men. Yeah. And the idea of marriage was it stopped a woman essentially from going off with anybody else. You know.
Well, what it did was it drove women into the home, into a very secluded environment where she's cut off from community, she's cut off from kith and kin. And because of women's natural innate ability for empathy and compassion, which has been driven out by individualistic capitalist culture, it's all about money and me culture, and I'm as guilty of that as anyone else, that we've come away from that feminine sentiment, our innate nature. So what the family's done is it's segregated women from other women. Why do you think we've got a reduction in community infrastructure? What I'm saying is it goes back to patriarchy. Women are distracted by being busy, and they're segregated. The marriage, the concept of the nuclear family segregates women from other women, and that's when you get change. When you get women who talk to women, we pick up on things that the men don't see, and the men are oblivious to, and we drive the social change. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you go to the abolitionist movement, a lot of this were women driving it as well. You had behind these men who were in power, it was the women abolishing slavery, and then that's when we got the change coming, women's rights. So what I'm saying, there
are a lot of female abolitionists.
The change began from colonialism up until the 19th century. Then we start seeing a shift in attitudes and the questioning about slavery and freeing. But then you've got extreme end of liberation, you have narcissism, or you have entitlement, because to free someone from the shackles of duty is to essentially embrace individualism and the self. So what I'm saying is it's a fine line. This is why you're getting
well, that's what capitalism embraces, isn't it?
But there are women who collude with others to peddle that ideology.
Well, I'm probably one of them. I'm one of the few feminists I know where I'm not an anti-capitalist feminist.
Well, by admitting this, by having the self-awareness, even to say this as women, that we are the first lot in history to be entitled, we're part of the problem.
Oh, we are. We're very much coming at this from a point of view of white privilege and white feminism. I'm not going to deny that. It doesn't mean to say I don't try to educate myself on it. I mean, I do. Yeah. And intersectional feminism has opened my eyes to a lot of things I didn't know was going on.
That's why they're saying black women, white women, we're all in this together.
we should be in it together.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're not, unfortunately, and we are far from that. And I think a lot of that is down to actual ignorance on the part of white women.
I actually feel, tell me if I'm wrong, my senses pick up, I feel black women are far more feminist in a way. Black women, female culture, they have a sense of feminism to me that's much more, they don't seem to take shit.
Abuse...
I can't explain it.
Yeah,
There's
I know.
something about black, like look Beyonce with all the single ladies. You know, I feel white women still pander, and I feel obviously I'm generalising massively here. But if you look at the black women and how they come out with Black Lives Matter, there's a sense of feminism in that.
I think that's it. I don't want to speak for anybody here because I'm not entitled to, and I'm certainly not qualified to. But I think that at the end of the day, the people who control the reins are white men. They still are white cis straight men.
When you see saying that, you just call them white men, but you're trying to say men assigned as men, but
cis men, they still hold the reins of power everywhere. And the thing is that
transition because they've had the privilege of being men and they transition to female.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that for women of colour, although that they're probably getting the brunt,
they put up with a lot of crap.
They do. I mean, the thing is, if you want to talk about statistics for domestic abuse, it tends to be more predominant in lower socioeconomic families. At least that's where it's more greatly reported. I mean, I do think actually that domestic abuse goes on in middle class circles. It certainly did in the middle class circles I was raised in, and it's underreported. But, you know, I think there's a general repression of women in middle class circles to report things because, you know, we don't want the neighbours knowing, we don't wash our dirty laundry in public. Yeah,
that's
the Mrs. Bouquets.
You've got the Mrs. Bouquets.
But I don't think the problem is as bad as it is for women of colour. Because
that's what I'm saying.
abuse.
I don't think women of colour, black. I don't think they endorse this. There aren't Mrs. Bouquet.
I think that might be being a bit presumptuous though, because I think women of colour don't have the recourses. You know, they're not going to be taken seriously. That's the point. They get the least amount of help available to them. They also have issues that you and I will never know about and never have to experience.
Like what?
Well, you know, for instance, I mean, again, I don't want to generalise, and I'm a bit uncomfortable sort of veering into this territory because it's something I don't know much about, but particularly mothers of sons, you know, where they're more likely to have their sons involved in gang activities. Their sons are more likely to get stopped and searched by the police, more likely to be arrested. You know, their sons are far more likely to be killed than the, you know, white sons are. And,
so
you know, they're facing...
We're talking systemic racism.
You know, you and I can go and get in a car and go to the shop and we don't have to worry about that. We don't face things like that every day. And just because we don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Are you talking about this very ultra-authoritarianism that comes from law and order, that's come from white male privileged colonialism?
Well, probably, yeah.
Left? Because a lot of people, conservatives, some of them would say, "Oh, this is feminist jargon. There's no such thing as white colonialism. It's all something that's made up by." I don't disagree. I believe there is absolutely. You can see it. We're living in it. We're in the birth of it now, aren't we? And it's
all part and parcel of the patriarchy.
Absolutely, but that's what I'm saying.
And what we have to recognise is that, you know, to the extent that we're both white people, we are going to be part of that problem. We are part of the patriarchy. As much as we feel we fight against it and we're victims of it, we are still part of it. I mean, so for instance, say your neighbour turned the radio on and wouldn't turn it off, and you're like, right, okay, I'll go and call the police, and let's pretend for 1 minute that the police would come out within 10 days. You know,
I just want to say that's not me panting, that's the dog. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we better make that clear. It's probably very distracting, actually, for anyone who's going to bother to listen to this.
Anne.
No, we are definitely not doing that. But yeah, so if I called the police out on a neighbour who was white, probably the police would just turn around and say, you know, this is a civil matter, I'm not going to get involved. If I turn around and call the police out, my neighbour happened to be black, they'd probably come down on him like a ton of bricks. And actually, there was an incident that happened earlier on, either this year or it was last year, where there was a man who was black and he was chatting up my friend who is white, and she wasn't interested in him, and he kept sitting next to her, and she was feeling very uncomfortable, and she said to me, oh, you know, mouthed through the window, help me. And I initially said, well, your bed, you lie in it, you deal with it.
Right.
But it was really, she didn't, and it was getting to the point where she was getting really uncomfortable and quite agitated, and so I just went in and said, look, mate, you know, she's not interested. You know, do yourself a favour, you're making yourself look like an idiot, just go and find someone else to talk to. I then left. The following week I came back, he was there, she wasn't there. This guy comes barreling through the door and starts yelling at me, calling me a white racist bitch and all the rest of it. Because no, but he said the basis of this was because he said that she had given him her number. Now she told me she gave him a fake number. It turned out she had given him her real number, and he thought that that meant she was interested, and I was just being racist. And it nearly came to blows. One of my friends got in between us. Security start coming in. Police were up the road. Police heard what was going on, came over. Immediately, a police officer said to me, "Do you want us to arrest him?"
Oh gosh, right.
Now, if that had been a white guy,
Yeah.
if he had been slamming 10 rounds into my face, I would not have been able to get him arrested for love or money.
So it's racism, there's systemic racism.
Yeah.
Which is just
And by the way, I'm saying that from experience, professionally and personally, where I've called the police out on white men several times.
Right.
My clients have as well, and they never get arrested.
Yeah.
Ever.
This is the another.
In fact, in 18 years of practicing family law, I have only ever known one husband to actually get charged and went to court, and he was acquitted.
Right.
So this myth, by the way, that men are always getting arrested, that's not true.
And actually, black men get a bad rap. This is a very interesting topic. It's a bit insidious, actually. The Black Lives Matter campaign. I feel like you. I don't feel I have a right to judge it. I don't know how you feel. However, I feel they have a point, though. I feel it has a point.
Oh no, I do, and I believe women of colour when they talk about the racism they experience and how white women are a problem with that. I respect that, and I'm not going to sit there and say prove it to me. I believe them.
But there's separate issues going on. So this issue
there are separate issues for them from the issues that we experience, and the point is we get our voices heard, they don't.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Although you could argue that's changing with the woke movement now, popular culture. They're trying to become more heard. I mean, the big argument I hear from people, this Black Lives Matter. Don't they realise that when we went over there in Africa in the Boer War, blah, 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 the Maasai tribes enslaved their own people? I mean, what bit hypocritical. But I say to these people, yes, okay, your argument is valid. But however, there is still an aphorism in what the people of colour are saying here.
Yeah, but we annihilated people's cultures.
We gave smallpox to Banner Indians. We wiped them out.
I know.
I say we, white men. I don't think it wasn't the women who sent these men off. Well, the noble women did.
I don't know.
I mean, Queen Elizabeth. Well, yeah, true.
Women are brutal in history. I've never been one of these feminists to advocate that, if women ruled the world, there'd be no wars. What? Bullshit.
Yeah.
Utter bullshit.
I think there would be.
I don't think we've ever had so many wars as we have under women. Look at Catherine the Great in Russia. That woman was merciless.
Well,
look
at Queen Elizabeth. Mary of Queen of Scots.
Yeah, but our empire was built
under. Her own cousin, for God's sake,
our empire was built under Queen Victoria.
But this is what I'm saying.
Margaret Thatcher, the minute she came in, declared war in the Falklands.
Culturally, they were men. They were adopting...
They were ascribing male characteristics. Traditionally male characteristics. I mean, I do actually think women are
they were
aggressive in nature. I mean, again, violence. We sit here and think violence is all learned and it's all bullshit. We're apes, and we're very chaotic apes at the end of the day. We're also predatory animals. As much as vegans don't want to hear that, we're natural predators, and so violence is instinctive in us.
But we're also very imaginative creatures, and we will adopt and believe what culture we are born
Yeah, we are,
into.
because women are...
these women were born into toxic masculine cultures.
And I'm sorry, but this was the stand. This was a very chauvinistic argument that I used to argue against all the time when I was younger, and now incels seem to have taken the complete opposite tack, because when I was younger it was women are not cut out for the army, women are not cut out for armed forces, women are not cut out for the police, because women are not strong enough, and aggression is not natural to women. These days now they want to reverse it. Women are just as bad as men, women abuse as much as men, women rape like men do. They completely change their arguments now. But back then that was an argument to keep women out of combat in the army, and to keep them out certain jobs, and also to make them think that they couldn't stand up to men because women are physically weaker, and men can overpower us, therefore men are superior to us. and that's why, you know, men are the boss.
It also comes from the chivalrous medieval view of women, that women are
Men
sacred.
fight for women, men fight, men are aggressive.
You know, women are the childbearers, they're the angels of the hearth. They're not to be seen in fisticuffs.
You see that in modern culture. How many times have I had to, you know, watch or hear, usually your old gammons like Piers Morgan, bemoaning the state of women in modern society and showing a load of half-clad drunk girls shouting, throwing their shoes at each other, and how, oh, it's so disgusting, it's so despicable. Yeah, it's absolutely fine when men behave like that.
Well, that's what I find.
You know, women getting into fights, these harridans as they call them, you know.
Well, that's what I find. These liberal conservative men who sit there and say they're all for J.K. Rowling. I do take it with a pinch of salt. Is it still misogyny? Because he's saying he wants to protect the female. Women aren't. We're going off topic. We were talking about women of colour here.
Well, initially we're talking about entitlement and women being agreeable and men feeling entitled, you know.
But that's what I'm saying.
But
you know, women of colour, they were slaves. You know, I can understand why they get intergenerational trauma.
But they've never stopped being slaves. That's the trouble. The roles that are designated for them, and then you put all these other issues on top, like I said, that they go through because of their race or their nationality on top. You know, they are getting the absolute worst of everything.
Yeah. Well, for certain ones, you've got people of colour who've been born into white colonial privilege, haven't you now? So you've got a subgroup of people who are, you can argue it's changing now. It is changing, isn't it? Starting to change.
Well, no, does the media want to make it look like it's changed more? Yeah, I mean that's the only thing. I mean, again, I'm really bordering on dangerous territory here. But
systematically.
But look at that program that was on Anne Boleyn, where they made Anne Boleyn black. And I can understand why they've done that, because they want people to feel that there's representation across the board, and that it makes it seem like, you know, it's always been normal for black people to be treated equally. Was
that an allegory of transference? Were they trying to say Anne Boleyn had reputation damage, she was colluded against, the things they said she slept with underage boys and all this stuff. She was vilified.
No.
So were they assigning a black person to play her because they're saying that because black people being repressed, she was ultimately repressed? Or do you think it was just woke?
I think they did it to be woke, but I don't think woke is always a bad thing. I mean, I hear this being thrown around as an insult, but I think it has its place. And I think, imagine a young child watching this thinking Anne Boleyn was black. Right, it's historically incorrect, but, you know, to them, why can't a black woman be a queen? That's what they're going to come away and think. So I see where it's coming from, the place it's coming from, but at the same time, you got to think, you know, under Henry VIII, we were starting to go overseas.
Yeah.
We were starting to take over territories.
Yeah.
And we were brutalising people.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're almost whitewashing that out. You know, we're saying that didn't happen because, you know what, black women could be queens. Back then, that's how they were being treated. No, they bloody weren't.
It's a paradox. We're actually to ignore the true historical facts.
Yeah.
To ignore misogyny. In a
way.
And
racism.
And racism.
You know, it's saying everything was great for black people back then.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And I kind of think it pisses on the memory, to be honest.
This is why I agree with you. Be realistic and always be prudent. We need to acknowledge the reality of history.
Yeah.
If we brush it under the carpet, we're brushing women's rights, we're brushing slavery, we're brushing everything that was heinous about our history. We are brushing it under the carpet, saying it didn't exist.
Well, no, what we're saying is there's absolutely no reason to struggle now, because there wasn't even a struggle then. When it was really bad for us, there wasn't even a struggle then. And to be honest, I've as a woman, I do find that quite offensive, to be honest.
Okay, on the trivial side of things, it's a one-off depiction. It's on the whole, the depictions have been as true to history as they can be. They've all been white actors. You're talking about a minority now. Yes, I understand the woke movement. We don't want to cover everything with woke. However, it makes people think. I don't think there's anything wrong in doing something different and saying something different. I'm glad they did it, because they're transcending boundaries. And then we have conversations about it, and then we can enlighten ourselves about it. And then you actually see the true people who are polarised from it, because the people who really don't like it, they've got an issue.
Yeah.
They are the ones who've got an issue about racism or sexism or something. They're the ones that have got an issue. You often hear of these white male baby boomers saying everyone's entitled, or you sound entitled, you want your rights, you're entitled, you've got this, you've got that, why can't you be happy, you're just entitled. You know, it's like when women want equality, or when women question men.
When men stop using the word slut and slag and, you know, telling women she should be at home, and like you say, you know, you've made to feel bad when you go out for a night, when that stops happening, we'll stop going on about it.
It's like these environmentalists, we're going down, you could say environmentalism is essentially feminist. It's about caring for nature.
I hate environmentalists.
Right, well, okay, what about the young girls who tipped over, they defamed Van Gogh recently? Van Gogh. You said Van Gogh, Van Gogh. You said potato, potato.
Van Gogh.
What do you think about that, about them intellectual patriarchy, about them defacing intellectual patriarchy? Because you could say that really all the great works, inverted commas,
I think the trouble is you're starting to get into the realms of left wing and right wing, which is completely off topic. But right, you know, I don't necessarily believe the far left are particularly feminist. In fact, I have met probably more chauvinists in the far left than I have on the far right.
I agree, because you know, an honest bastard is better than a dishonest bastard.
Yeah, what they mean by equalisation is equalising down. No, what they want to do is they want to stop women being better than them. That's the bottom line. They're doing it under a cloak of equality. But they don't really, they loathe middle-class women more than they loathe middle-class men, put it that way.
Yeah.
That's why I cannot align myself with extreme far-left feminism.
Yeah.
They're more about being left-wing than they are about being feminist. And there seems to be an assumption that feminism is part of the left, and I think to some extent it is.
But there's environmental...
It's more leftist politics than right.
But ecological feminism would say environmentalism is at its root, at grassroots, it's about nature, it's about community, because you need to gather the soil, the nuts and the berries which you've shared with the community. Again, matrilineal. I'm saying at the root of the innate female, it was before agricultural, before 5,000, 10,000 years ago, we didn't segregate the land. We were nomadic. Is environmentalism this knee-jerk reaction to colonialism and to sectioning off the land, which is inherently patriarchal, which segregated, which women then became chattel property? You had everything came together. That was the birth of patriarchy.
I can still bring it down to Christianity. The church has already seized most of the lands.
Which was men, though. Before all this, it was matrilineal. Women were the farmers, they were the hunters, they were the gatherers. The women were ruling the roost. So this environmentalism, these left-wingers, who, I know what you're saying, they've politicised it again. They shouldn't politicise it. Is this where you're saying you feel that there's an agenda?
So you're saying that basically all hippies are feminists?
No, I'm not saying that.
Because Charles Manson certainly was.
No, I'm actually saying you could find patriarchy in hippiedom, because, for example, in the civil rights movement...
Very prevalent in hippie movement.
I remember a story about the women's civil rights movement. These women were retelling a story where a group of men and women, this was in the 60s, they went and started a commune. And the men basically said, we're all hippies, we're all free love. I
free
want
love.
To sleep with you.
So I can fuck everything in front of me.
Women started becoming hit on. The men were hitting on the women. Yeah. What was happening was
free rape.
By nature of this hippie movement, men were infiltrating patriarchy, and these women were starting to feel uncomfortable, and a lot of women left this commune.
So it was a cult.
It was exactly.
It becomes a cult.
But that's because these men were still peddling the patriarchy, but it was being peddled as free love.
Yeah.
So really, you're right.
I don't think that's what marriage is.
But that's where I'm saying, so politics, could we argue then that actually left wing and right wing, it's all a load of crap? It's really about discussing nature and getting to the root of human nature.
Yeah.
Because what politics does is it acts as a veneer for an ideology.
Yeah.
Which at the root of everything
is exploitation.
Is exploitation, and also, you could argue, would have misogynistic undertones.
You find misogyny everywhere, and I've always said this, women have enemies everywhere. You cannot say there is a political party or a group or a culture or an economy or anything which is your friend.
No, but
there is the fact is chauvinism or sexism is rife everywhere. It is everywhere. But I don't think this is down to men are naturally this and want to dominate and they're aggressive and they're warlike, and I don't think it's that.
We come from chimps and bonobos. Chimps very aggressive.
But they're not patriarchal.
Bonobos is matriarchal. Chimps is patriarchal.
Nearly all mammalian societies are matriarchal. But what I think has happened, and I keep going back to this, is I think we have had over 2,000 years of a mafia almost of religion, where we now think it is normal to live in patriarchal societies, and everything is following the mould of a patriarchal religion. Which has been set up, and everything. So our politics, because religion plays a very small part in most societies, Western societies now. But the trouble is it's left its footprint on everything. So our media, our culture, our music, our families, our jobs, our economies, everything is still following that patriarchal pattern.
It's a shadow. We're in the shadow.
Men are at the top, and we are the nurturers, the servants. We're always in a servile role. And I think this is where it comes right back to the issue of entitlement of men and agreeableness of women. And I think that is why women will always, and it's almost been so long now that it is instinct now in women to be like that.
To adapt
even
their
from being
behaviour.
a child, to adapt their behaviour and to be agreeable. And that's what I said. Even I consider myself to be probably one of the most outspoken feminists I know, very unapologetic, do not care, you cannot shame me. But even I, when I was younger, I've given in at times when I should have stood up, and I've been quiet when I should have spoken out, and I've done that because it's an invisible presence.
I'm just arguing here for men, because obviously we're two women. What about the men who commit suicide, who feel they've got no one to talk to? Are they the victims themselves of patriarchy?
Yeah, I do think they are. I think you can bring everything back to patriarchy, because how could you bring it back to anything else? It's all we've ever had.
Because
how can they blame feminists? Feminists have never had... I mean, I know it's only incels who do this, because since Eve, they've wanted to blame women for everything. But, how can you blame feminists when feminists have had little to no influence in society? How could it be down to anything? We either have feminist or we have patriarchal.
But you could argue feminist Marxism now is saying that it's capitalist patriarchy, and there are victims that are men, and there are victims that are women.
I've actually been accused. I've actually been accused of espousing Marxist feminist principle. In that, I do blame I think it starts in the home, and I think that's why women learn very early on that they have to be agreeable, because even if you have a feisty mum who could even be the breadwinner, I mean, my mother certainly was, she was the breadwinner in our house, what you are still seeing is the woman having to take on all the responsibility and the man getting all the privilege as such. He gets to come home after a day at work, kick off his shoes and enjoy his supper and watch whatever, and then he'll get nagged at. That's the price he has to pay for it.
Now, Angela Saini will argue, and she will say women have to be more aware of them. For example, she said women have a duty now to feminists to say, if they see their mother cooking and slaving over in the kitchen, and then everyone eats her meal, and then they just leave the dishes for her to do. She said this is the problem. Some women will just naturally go up and clean up the mess and leave the men. It's so programmed into us. And she said we've got to rewire our
I don't
brains.
think it's programmed. I think it's just that they've tried and they've nagged and they've tried every way to get someone else to do something. They just don't bloody do it. I think that, unfortunately, that's not just in the family, that's everywhere. I mean, I'm the only person who ever does anything in my office. And if I don't do it, it doesn't get done. And other people have to be told to do things. Tasks have to be allocated. Nobody else carries around the mental responsibility. I've noticed this in other offices I've worked in.
This is autism, which they say autism is more a link to the male brain. And can you say that men, especially young mummies, boys, things like that, they don't take initiative, a lot of them. They want to be told what to do. They don't think to think, oh,
no, they've not been made to. They're not been made to. I think as well, I mean, generally, discipline in children, discipline seems to be such an ugly word these days. And that's why we have got generations of young people coming out who cannot even wipe their own arses unless they're being told how to do it and have to be told every time. Who don't think for themselves, who don't use any initiative. And I'm sorry, that's not just middle-aged moaning. I'm not a boomer, can't accuse me of that. It's what I've seen, and that's because kids these days do not grow up in an atmosphere of fear of a good hiding. I see all the time stay-at-home mums who I think, because they are stay-at-home mums and don't go out to work, feel that they have to occupy all of their time running around doing housework and clearing up after their children, and therefore children are not clearing up after themselves. So it's a way of almost, they feel they've got to justify their existence in the home by doing the chores for everybody, and then they create a generation of children who are used to somebody else clearing up after them, and it doesn't even occur to them that they should be getting off their asses and contributing, and they actually make the worst staff at work because it doesn't even occur to them. You can't say they're doing it on purpose. They're just naturally lazy now because they've not had to do anything at home. You're not doing your kids a service by doing this.
But there's also innate differences. I think you'll find that when women take on the burden of child rearing, they will, by their nature, take on more jobs. I was an exception to the norm in our childhood, because my father, as you know, it was a role reversal. He did a lot of the cooking, the cleaning, the gardening, the working. He was just ADHD beyond belief, stratospherically productive, male and female in one body. This is rare, though, a mutation from Mother Nature. They don't throw up these men often. Most girls will grow up watching the dads being quite, not sorry, but I feel that there's a laziness in men that I don't feel. I'm just going to say, on the whole, I feel, especially when children come along and child rearing comes along, the oxytocin and all this kicks in, women tend to take on the higher labour, unless you have a particular woman who's self-aware, who's able to say, no,
I think
you
women,
do it.
and I noticed this.
I noticed this.
Yeah, but I noticed this in an office environment. It's not just in the home. Women tend to come in and they organise and they get on with it. What I found when you've got men who have secretaries, the secretaries are like their mothers. They run around and do everything for them. And these women will come and go, oh, don't you worry about that, I'll do that for you. If you've got a woman who's a boss, they expect you to do everything. And you've got to treat your staff like a baby. It might be a generational thing as well, though. It's been a long time since I've worked in any other office other than my own. But what I'm saying is that you immediately assume the role of organising everybody, because there won't be anyone there to organise you as a woman. You're there to organise everybody else. And somehow, rather than see this almost as a leadership role, we've turned this and we've made it almost like someone's servile if they go in and do
so you're
that.
talking about
This is what you need a wife for. This is what you have a secretary for. Like, they're lower down when they do that.
Homemaking. The admin.
Yeah.
It's the stereotypical personal assistant that's female, who's people pleasing, who takes initiative and organises, and the man doesn't have to tell her what to do. She's already done it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But when that secretary is working for a woman, she suddenly just kind of sits there and doesn't do anything and expects to be told what to do and shows no initiative. And you find me a female boss who doesn't moan about this. And I'll tell you what's even worse is when you're a female boss and you've got a man working for you. Oh my God, you do not know hell like that.
What's that like, do you feel?
Unbearable, intolerable. The atmosphere, because he doesn't like the fact he's working for a woman, is excruciating. It is constant abuse every single day. Testing you, questioning you, gaslighting you, constantly telling you that you didn't do something when you did, or you did something when you didn't, that you're getting everything wrong, mansplaining your job to you all the time, getting annoyed, constantly interrupting you, wanting to take up all your time when you need to get things done, trying to make you do things that you don't need to. It's constantly working against you all the time. They're not there to help you, but they'll pretend they are. That's what it's like having a man working for you.
Because they don't actually like it.
I've only ever had one bloke working for me where he treated me like an equal. Right. We were closer in age, but the rest of them absolutely shockingly awful.
Is that entitlement from a lazy generation?
No, they were different ages. Well, they're 20 years apart.
Is that the dynamic you think you get between male and female?
And do you know what I've noticed with men? They don't like being called a secretary. I'll be a personal assistant, not a secretary.
Right, because it's associated with a female.
Yeah, and
that's language.
Yeah, but men find that insulting.
Right, so that's an interesting one. So where does that come from?
I mean, the thing is, women's attitudes in the workplace towards men generally, and this is what I noticed. So I worked in 2 firms, and I also did work experience in other firms in London. So I've worked in legal 500 firms. These are like the top range of firms. I've worked in medium-sized legal aid firms. I've worked myself as well in a very small firm. Yeah. But the one thing I've noticed is the women who get ahead are the women who don't like other women, who see the other women as their enemy. And I found this in politics as well. I don't know if you remember with Tony Blair when Labour came to power in 97, and he had Margaret Beckett, Claire Short, Mo Mowlam, and they were known as Blair's babes.
Oh, yes.
I mean, Claire Short, I think, was more feminist than the others, but they were.
She was the one that. She left cabinet because she
didn't agree.
Stood up to him.
Well, I think wasn't that over the Iraq? Was that over the Iraq War?
She walked out.
Yeah, but she was one actually he was against because they legalised hardcore pornography. Labour. She was against that, and I did agree with her on that.
Oh my gosh, they did, didn't they?
Yeah.
Labour? But this again is the liberal ideology. This is
but people will say they weren't real Labour.
No, but this is neoliberal ideology. This is again.
It's not real communism under Stalin. When is it then?
Yeah, but that's what communism tried to do. Look at the Eastern European women. Why do you think they're all alcoholics? Because they were inbred from the Soviet Union.
Because I think they're all alcoholics, aren't they?
Well,
here we go. Bit of racism, casual racism for the day.
Oh, well, there was lots of brutalisation. You look at the
Russia has one of the highest.
And
Russia has one of the highest rates of alcoholism in men.
It's extreme.
I think isn't the average age life expectancy of a Russian man 65?
It's awful. Yeah. It's a very brutal culture. Eastern Bloc, actually.
Yeah.
And this is where I think Angela Saini gets it wrong, because she's like, oh, we could actually learn something from the USSR. And what I know that it wasn't perfect, but what the Communist Manifesto were trying to do is they were trying to strip down all the patriarchal norms, and they were trying.
Well, we could also learn a lot from the Holocaust, but there you go. You know, some lessons are more important than others. It's certainly not a feminist one.